Do you feel like you're constantly striving to be more, do more, and finally feel good about yourself? Have you ever reached a goal only to end up feeling exhausted or unfulfilled? Welcome to Full and Thriving, the podcast that helps you reconnect with yourself and live life authentically. I'm your host, Meg McCabe, a certified life coach, recovery coach, retreat leader, and speaker who has spent the last decade helping other people reach mental healing and build a better life for themselves. In today's episode, we tackle a question so many of us wrestle with. Am I enough? We're joined by Lily Thrope, a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Thrope Therapy, who specializes in healing body image issues and eating disorders. Lily's here to guide us through breaking free from the exhausting cycle of constant striving and never feeling like we're enough. We'll dive into the importance of body acceptance, ways to slow down in a fast-paced world, and how to meet your own needs before burnout strikes. If you've been feeling overwhelmed or stuck in the pursuit of weight loss or perfection, this episode will give you the tools to embrace who you are without overworking or overextending yourself. Stick around. You don't want to miss Lily's wisdom. Hello, Lily. How are you this morning?
Hi, Meg. I'm so excited to be here and talk about this super important topic.
I'm so grateful to have you here today. It's been really fun to just get to know you over the years on Instagram as a therapist and have you on the show for the first time. I can't wait to dive into the topic we chose today, which is the idea of not feeling like enough and the constant striving and burnout that comes with that. And before we dive into that today, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it has been great to get to know you. I think what you do is so important, and I'm so inspired by everything that you do and excited to be on the podcast. So a little bit about me. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified intuitive eating counselor. I love supporting people in recovering from eating disorders, but also recovering from disordered eating, constant dieting, recovering into larger bodies. I work with a lot of LGBTQ clients, and I also have a group practice in New York City. We see people in person and virtually. I'm licensed in Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts, hoping to get New Jersey soon, so expanding the reach a little bit. And a lot of my passion of working with this population comes from my own experience with constant dieting, my own eating disorder, my own depression also. And I think that will tie in really well with this constant striving and where that comes from. So I'm really excited to share more about that.
Wow. Thank you for putting that all together. I'd love to just dive right in and hear kind of about your childhood and what it was like living in that situation with, constant dieting. When did you start dieting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in Long Island, and I feel like that says enough. There's a lot of toxic energy there, a lot of pressure, a lot of competition to be the best. And when I was reflecting on this, I was thinking, like, why do we try to be the best at something or be the thinnest or make the most money? And often it comes from wanting our needs to be met. And I think what happened for me, at least, is that I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be recognized. And I have two older siblings. I'm the baby. They were already doing all the stuff, sports, applying to college, all this stuff. And I'm trying to get seen. And I think dieting became this way to be seen and connect with community that was pursuing something that seemed like the right thing to pursue. I think so much of our culture and society and, wellness culture promotes the idea that if you are pursuing this thing, you are morally good. And I think I had this desire to be good. I wanted to do the right things. I wanted to look the right way. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be seen and understood. And I saw dieting as the way to get there. Another context piece that is important is I actually got my period in 5th grade. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I think it's an important piece is that my body was changing at such an early age while my peers' bodies were not changing. And that was a really hard thing for me to wrap my head around as a 10-year-old. I mean, that's really young to be navigating those types of changes. So for me, I think I started dieting in 5th grade because I noticed my body changing and I saw the solution to that eating less and trying to stay as small as possible to continue to be told like, you're so cute and you're so small. And that is something that people say to young people. So I think that's really to me where the root of it started. And then obviously the validation you get for that. Wow, you're so disciplined. You're so thoughtful about what you eat. You exercise so much. The praise is just so hard to turn away from. And I think another part of it is that I was an athlete. I always played soccer. And in that community, again, it's promoted that if you're taking care of your body, in quotations, you're not eating a lot and you're exercising a ton. So I think the messaging was coming from everywhere. And I just like scooped everything up and wanted to be the best at this thing. Yeah.
I really appreciate that context. I think it's so true. Like, I could imagine Long Island, like life in Long Island, because I grew up in Connecticut, probably very similar energies in some ways. And I feel like the culture is so normalized. You can have an eating disorder or like be chronically dieting and people just think it's normal because it's so embedded into the culture. I remember having an active eating disorder and for years, my doctor never flagged it because he was just like, oh, you're just an athlete. Athletes lose their period.
Totally. Yeah. I think the normalization is really important. So many people wouldn't do this if it wasn't like promoted and normalized by our culture and actually celebrated. I think that's another piece. It's not only normalized, it's celebrated. And I think that's what's really hard is when you're being celebrated because the need that you have is to be seen and to be accepted. You start getting accepted for this thing and you think it's because of that, not because of who you are. So I think that's how we kind of get away from valuing who we are and valuing our worth from a place that doesn't involve constant striving in our accomplishments. School is another example, right? You get seen for getting good grades. And I think that's part of what develops this constant striving experience.
Absolutely. So during that time, I'm curious, did your family support the dieting or were they kind of just thinking you were doing what normal girls do?
I feel like I was pretty secretive about it. So at that time, I was pretty secretive about it. I definitely like had my journal where I was writing down what I was eating. I don't think it was as noticed because I never was in a super small body. I think at that time, I was also very athletic. So it didn't seem amiss that I would be, losing weight if I was. Yeah, I think my family is a complicated piece because they have their own challenges with food and body image. Like, I love my mom. It's such a tough thing to talk about, but I think she did promote some of these dieting behaviors and had her own history of chronic dieting and trying to lose weight. And I watched her be connected with her mom about their pursuit of weight loss. And when my mom actually started losing weight, I think her relationship with my grandmother deteriorated because it was hard for my grandmother to see my mom actually losing weight. So I think I did see a lot of the dynamic around bodies and changing of sizes and how that can impact relationships. And I would actually say I connected with my mom about the pursuit of weight loss. And when I started to give that up, I had to find other ways to connect to my mom that didn't involve pursuit of weight loss and dieting. And I would say that's still a struggle for me today is like, how do I connect with my mom when that's still something that she maybe values?
Wow. Yeah. I've definitely seen that bond that dieting and the pursuit of weight loss can bring to a relationship. Like I remember observing I think it was my aunt and my cousin one time just talking. They hadn't seen each other in a really long time. And they just started talking about weight loss immediately. And I just remember thinking this must be like their connective struggle. Just an interesting, side conversation in itself, just because I think that's a lot of how women in our society bond as well. It's like mother-daughter relationships, friendship relationships. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as growing up, you said you were never really in like a thinner body anyways. How did that relate to your feeling of constantly striving or never feeling like enough?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been super helpful for me is just acknowledging that body diversity exists. And I think this is not something we talk about a lot. It's kind of a simple thing, but my body just was different than my peers. Like I said, I menstruated really early. I just was a curvier person, and that wasn't what I was seeing around me. That wasn't what I was seeing in media. And I think it causes you to question, is there something wrong with what I'm doing? I'm doing
Right.
something wrong. And I think this is where that root of negative self-talk comes from, of I'm the problem. I've done something wrong and I've caused my body to be this way, versus the idea that all bodies look different. People have different bone structure. They have different bone shape and size, and genetics play a role in all these other things. It just felt like the people who were doing it right looked a certain way, and I wasn't doing that. So I think that experience of feeling so different caused me to question what I thought was good for me. And I needed to look outside. I needed to learn how to eat the least. I needed to figure out the best way to get seen and not be in this body. I wanted to escape my body. I wanted to trade my body in for someone else's body. And I think that's the experience of a lot of people looking at social media or, magazines at the time or whatever that media was. It's the constant comparison started this feeling of, well, if I just worked harder, if I just strive more, I'm going to get that thing. And that the reason you want that thing is because you're going to get your needs met. And my needs were to be emotionally seen, emotionally valued. And unfortunately, pursuing that never got me that. And it took me a very long time to get there, but it never got me what I was looking for, which continues to lead to that burnout feeling.
So I think, I know I've heard my clients express this desire to escape your body or just swap bodies with someone else, or feel like your body's not a reflection of who you are as a person, sort of a thing. And when you were in that space, and you started questioning everything, what was it like to have that internal conflict of just being like, I can't leave this body. I want to escape from it. I'm starting to doubt this works, but I'm still hanging on. Were you in that space for a while?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing I can say is that it was exhausting. It is physically, emotionally, mentally exhausting and isolating to go through this experience in your head of, I know I'm doing the right things. I'm not getting the experience I want. I'm not feeling the way I want. I'm not being seen. It is so exhausting and isolating to be in that space in your head. And I think for a very long time, I would say from 5th grade till maybe my sophomore year in college, I was alone in my head battling this every single day. On top of school and friends and sports, I had my own little battle that I was doing with this voice in my head telling me I was not enough.
Wow. Okay, so when you were sophomore year, what started to change for you?
Yeah, so I went to college in LA, which was a really different experience where there was a lot more like chill energy and a different experience. I unfortunately got connected with this yoga program and became paleo and started doing this like crazy diet. And that's when my eating disorder really got bad. So I would say during my college years is when the eating disorder really became an eating disorder and not just like the constant dieting and striving. I then really started to be able to develop an eating disorder. And I think college is a really big risk time for that because you're not around anyone that you know, and there's just less people looking out for you in a different way, and you have this independence. So a combination of things caused my eating disorder to really kick up in college. And at that time, I started to distance from friends and experience more depression symptoms. And I think that was the first time I really got a therapist that understood eating disorders and helped me start working on them. I didn't really start to recover, I would say, until 2 years after college. Like, it was a long kind of recovery process, which I think is true for a lot of people. When I got connected with an intuitive eating dietitian, that's when I really started to recover once I moved back to New York City and I was in grad school. But I think what changed is just like I had the independence to be able to really go deeper into my eating disorder, which is definitely hard to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. That is hard to probably reflect on and think about. And, college is supposed to be this really exciting time, but I know there's so many individuals who have that period of their life go awry because of the new independence and less support and the change, right? Coping for all of those changes that happen all at once with the eating disorder. So, okay, so you're in college, you have found the intuitive eating counselor, and you have at what point do you start to realize you're never going to feel like you're enough?
Good question. Yeah. So I think the feeling of never being enough comes from society telling you that you are not enough. And society, I'm using society broadly, but I think you know what I mean by that. Society, wellness culture, hustle culture needs you to believe you're not enough, because then it keeps you roped into constantly striving and ignoring your own needs for the benefit of others, whether that's the diet industry, which gets money from us every time we engage with a new diet, whether that's, the work you're doing. And if you put your needs aside, you can do better work and make someone more money. And I think there's a lot of pressure to continue to work towards putting your needs aside to benefit someone else. And I think I had to realize that by putting my needs aside, I was only hurting me. I wasn't helping myself at all. And I think there was a part of me that thought, by putting my needs aside, by pursuing these other things, I'm somehow going to get my needs met. And this is a moving target that never got hit. I never hit the target. You will never, ever hit the target by avoiding your needs. Unfortunately, we are humans and we have needs. And this is something that I had to come back to, was that root of it, knowing that by avoiding my needs, my basic needs for food and energy, I wasn't hitting this target. But I convinced myself I was. And that's when you feel like you're not enough. Why can't I hit this target when I'm doing all the things that I was told I needed to do to hit this target? To me, that's like the crux of it. It's that when you stop striving for that and tune into your own needs and figure out healthier ways to get those needs met, whether that's through community, therapy, whatever kind of gets your juices flowing, that's when you're going to feel like enough. When you stop striving for this moving target that doesn't exist, and you can be present with yourself now and say, what do I need? I might need food. I might need to go out for a walk. I might need to rest. Once you can figure that out, that's when you start feeling like enough, which is so opposite of what we've been taught.
It's so hard for people too, because they imagine someone's going to give them like a medal for depriving themselves in all areas, and that medal never arrives. Right? It's like, no, I have a client who always says, no one's going to give me a medal for like overworking myself. And it's so true. And I love how you were able to break that down and describe that to people, because I feel like the concept of never feeling enough can be so elusive sometimes, right? Because it's a moving target. But when you think about how you can simply start turning inward and meeting your needs in a healthier way, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So when did you start meeting your needs and taking care of yourself and like let go of that constant striving? And what was going on in your brain during that time?
Yeah, so there's a few different things that I think were happening. One, I went to grad school, which was the best thing for me. I became a social worker. During my time in social work school, I think I really started to connect more with human beings having needs and having especially emotional needs that I think I had convinced myself I had no emotional needs. And I think that's something a lot of people do to get through and keep pursuing things that really aren't for them. Social work school really helped me connect with the idea that I do have emotional needs. And if I'm going to support other people through their own challenges, I need to start taking care of my own shit. And that was really the first time that I started to recover, not only from my eating disorder, but also work on my anxiety and depression symptoms that were part of why I was constantly striving. Like anxiety is another major reason why people strive, is that they want to resolve this anxiety feeling of what if I fail? What if X, Y, and Z? That anxiety fueled for me a lot of constant striving. So I think it was partially going to grad school and like rewiring my brain to learn what humans need, like literally starting from developmental stages of growth. Like, what do we need? We need these certain things to be able to thrive. And I think that reset some of my thinking. I also started working with an intuitive eating dietitian who helped me kind of conquer some of my food fears, expose me to new foods, go back to foods that I loved as a kid and eat those. I remember one of my challenge foods was like French toast. That was like such a great challenge food. And I love French toast and eat it all the time now, but something that I didn't allow myself for a really long time. So I worked really intensely with this intuitive eating counselor. And then also, honestly, I listened to so many podcasts. Like, I truly recovered through podcasts. I listened to Jesse Haggerty's podcast, which was amazing at the time. I listened to Christy Harrison. I found these podcasts and people were talking about food and bodies in a different way. And that helped me realize that I was never going to get this thing. I was never going to feel at peace and happy in my body if I wasn't fueling my body and taking care of my body. So it was a lot of different things coming together at once, but I can't even describe the experience of realizing everything I was doing for, 20 years wasn't getting me the thing that I wanted. And there was another way. There was a different way to feel valuable, to feel worthy. And it didn't involve me ignoring my needs. It was the opposite.
Did you have any significant aha moments that really changed the path for you? I'm just curious because I'm a big podcast listener and a big learner. And sometimes I'll like read something in a book and it changes my whole perspective. I'm curious if anything clicked on that level for you. And if not, it's okay because I'm putting you on the spot a little here.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of aha moments. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I can point to was just learning about intuitive eating, like reading Intuitive Eating, the actual book written by Elise and Evelyn, the creators of intuitive eating. I think everything about intuitive eating challenged what I had believed was health. I really started to dismantle what I had understood to be healthy living. And I don't even like the word health. It's complicated, it's nuanced, it's convoluted, but I think that to me was the biggest aha moment, was learning about intuitive eating. Every podcast episode I listened to that had, one of the founders on or had someone talking about their experience with intuitive eating, that really blew my mind. Just the idea that there are different ways to approach eating and intuitive eating is one of them. And you can value satisfaction. Like, that had never crossed my mind before. So I think everything I learned about intuitive eating created aha moments for me.
Really, really good answer there. I feel like it's so different than what we've all been taught, especially in diet culture. It's a relief to come across something that kind of acknowledges so much more than just like calories in, calories out, all those things that the BS of diet culture perpetuates. So could totally see how that would just blow your mind and you'd get hooked on all the podcasts and books. So I think that's great. One thing we were talking about before we started recording was how you have started to accept or have accepted the identity of living in a larger body. And I'm curious about how you got to that point, especially with the background of constantly dieting and striving.
Yeah. So I think this has been a really important part of my recovery journey. I think it's hard to talk about being in a larger body for me specifically because I never want to co-opt, people's experiences who are in larger bodies than me. I have started recently getting comfortable with identifying as someone in a larger body. And there's a whole spectrum of obviously bodies and, who's in a larger body and who's not. But I think just to speak from my own experience and just keep in mind that I do have some amount of, I would say, like straight culture privilege in that I could go shopping at a store and, find something at that store that probably could fit me. I think there's an experience of being in a larger body that is different for everyone. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I started identifying as being in a larger body when I went to an eating disorder conference. It was the Fed Up conference, and I wanted to go into this breakout room that was for people in larger bodies. And I had this crazy internal dialogue of, do I belong in there? Can I go in there? Like, am I not seeing my body properly? Because I've spent so many years not knowing what my body looks like. Like, what does my body look like? Can I go? It really was this whole kind of body dysmorphic experience. And I went in the room, and the people in the room couldn't have been more gracious. I actually shared that this is what I was feeling because that was authentic to what I was feeling. And we processed it together. And they were like, there's a spectrum. And if you identify as being on the spectrum and have had experiences of this society making you feel like your body is too large to be in this space, then I think you're totally welcome in this room. And you have experienced moments where this body has been told that it is too much. And I think the best example I can give is most restaurants have these like very small chairs that kind of like go in. I don't know, like the metal pieces go in, and I cannot sit in those. And often at restaurants, I have to request, a booth or to sit somewhere else, or I sit there uncomfortably getting bruises on my, sides, sitting in these uncomfortable chairs. So that was a really powerful experience for me to just be in this room, share in this experience, feel validated in my experience of being in a larger body. I think it is really hard because when I do say to people like, oh, I'm in a larger body, often they're like, no, you're not fat. And I have to explain to them, like, this is a reclaiming of my experience. Like, there is so much judgment around the word fat when it is just a descriptor of a body. And I know for some people that word would not feel validating and reclaiming. But for me, being able to identify as that and understand my body through that lens has been so helpful in my body image journey. So just like healing my relationship with my body, being able to identify that for me feels really validating and gives me community and context for my experience in the world.
I just love that story of you being at the conference, just because I really believe in the power of community and how community can be healing. So could you share a little bit about how you felt being in a room for the first time where people weren't focused on this striving for thinness?
Yeah, that's a great point. I truly have to give so much credit to community for part of my recovery without having other people to connect with who have similar experiences as me. I'm not sure that I would have stayed connected with recovery in the way I have. Like, that's one thing that I think my clients are really lacking, is finding community who is also recovered and is living in this way. Unfortunately, we're constantly bombarded with the opposite. So, you're at work and you're getting an email about, low calorie snacks, or, someone saying that they can't eat so much because they ate so much over the weekend. And knowing that I have a community who's not speaking in that way, I know that I'm not going to be triggered when I am around these friends. When I am with my group of people, I know that I'm not going to have to face any diet talk. I know that I'm not going to have to face any pursuit of thinness or discussion around that, or celebration of that. And I think that was just so mind-blowing to me, that there could be a group of people who don't talk about that, because every other space I'm in, there's always some comment about who's losing weight, who's doing this, who's doing that. And for the first time, I have a group of people that I'm surrounded with that I know will never be talking about other people's bodies or weight loss, or, what they're doing to, change their body. They're just in their bodies, accepting their bodies. Being around that is so powerful. And I'm sad that so many people don't have that experience.
Mm-hmm. I'm just really grateful that community exists, right? It makes me like a little, I don't know, this is my next question. When people are resistant of accepting their body, and they're resistant of, like, maybe proclaiming that they're living in a larger body, what advice do you have to say to people who are kind of still in that space of holding on to the dream that the eating disorder is selling them, right? Like, you will be seen if you lose weight, versus, I know this community exists and I'm afraid to go there.
Yeah. First of all, I would say, like, I really want to validate your experience of how hard it is to process the body changes that you are going through, because I think people jump really quickly to, let's just get you connected. Let's get you feeling good about your body. And we need to take a lot of time in the grieving process of understanding and accepting your body. And it's not a quick process, I would say. So I think I wouldn't want to jump too quickly to, let's get you, to accept your body and connect with these people and feel good about the word fat. But let's sit in this grief, and let's sit in this experience of letting go of everything you've believed for a really long time together. Let's be a witness to the pain that comes with maybe living in a larger body in a society that doesn't accept us. So I think I would first want to validate that experience and make sure that they know that I understand that this didn't come out of nowhere. This makes sense. It makes sense that you would pursue this because you deserve to feel worthy. And this was the way that you thought you could get your needs met and feel worthy. So first, I would want that to be the experience. Then I think it's a slow process of unlearning, relearning, rewiring the brain, figuring out what works for that person, which might be a body neutral experience. It might be a more harm reduction experience. It might not be the case that they are going to feel great about their body. Like, that might not be realistic. So I think also setting realistic goals, figuring out what is going to work for this person, what is realistic for them, and kind of going with that. I feel like I don't have like one piece of advice, but I wish I could sum it up into one sentence. Maybe the advice is just kind of like, take care of your needs. Like, what are your emotional and physical needs? And are you taking care of those? Because that, to me, is body acceptance. Body acceptance is actually truly taking care of your needs and not focusing on the impact of that as much as just listening to your cues and taking care of your needs. So maybe that's the advice, is just to slow down and take care of your needs as best as you can, which I know can mean something different for everyone.
I think that's such a helpful place to start, because when you are listening to your needs, you are not focusing on how your body looks, right? You're focusing on honoring it maybe for the first time ever, or respecting your body. And so if you can practice that, acceptance starts to become a little bit easier.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. So I love that you were able to put it that way. So as far as helping people, so a lot of this conversation has been talking about this feeling of not feeling like enough, constantly striving. We haven't really touched on burnout too much. Can you kind of share how the burnout and constantly striving are related and what people can do to start like basically slowing down?
Yeah. So I think we sort of touched on burnout. I didn't use the word, but I think it's that feeling of just being so exhausted, like mentally, physically, emotionally, you're just disconnected and exhausted, which I think really does directly come from the constant striving and ignoring your needs. So I think there's a difference between striving to meet a goal and like constant striving and ignoring your needs. So I think it's, if you have a goal and you're pursuing it in a way that's balanced, that's so different than someone who's just like constantly striving to get the validation. And I think that's what leads to burnout, because the validation is never going to make you feel worthy. And we want that validation to lead to this internal sense of worthiness. But that's where the burnout happens, is I'm getting all the validation, I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm still feeling really tired and I'm not feeling good. So to me, the way to work on burnout, again, is to take care of your needs. And I know that's such a oversimplification of it, but a lot of the work that I do with my clients is let's slow down. Some of your needs were not met, whether it was from a parent or a community member or yourself. You didn't meet your needs and you couldn't get your needs met. So you started doing all these other things. You started going around the mulberry bush, trying a million things, and you still never got your needs met. So a lot of what we're doing is going back to the root and trying to help you get your needs met now. We cannot go back. We can't go back and have your parent do that now, but you can be your parent. You can find a mentor that can step in and be like a parent to you and give you those needs that you didn't have. So again, a simplification, but I think a very important part of healing is figuring out what needs are not being met and then being able to meet those needs either yourself or with the help of others. It doesn't have to be alone, but I think there's something really powerful about being able to meet your own needs. Like that is something I love helping people get back to.
So when it comes to helping people get back to that point, how do you first, because I assume step one is slowing down to an extent. How do you support the people who have been on go, go, go mode for 20, 30, 40 years?
Great question. I feel like if I had the answer to that, I would be writing a book, I'd be a millionaire, but
that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. I think another step that we're missing is awareness. Like, I think a big part of this is accepting and becoming aware that you have been doing this thing. So the first step is really realizing like I'm maybe in my own way because of this constant striving and I want to slow down. So I think people have to want to slow down, which is part of the work, is getting people from that phase of like contemplating maybe this is a good thing to like action where you're actually wanting to take the actions. My favorite way to slow down is really mindfulness. And I know mindfulness can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but helping my clients find a way to practice mindfulness, which might be when you're brushing your teeth, just taking 1 second to note something that you're grateful for that day. It could be doing a meditation. It could be deep breathing. It could be so many different things, but I think it's helping each client find out what is one time in my day where I can just slow down a little. Like you really have to start small. Some people can only access 10 seconds of mindfulness or meditation. And I love that. Start with 10 seconds. If you can do 2 deep breaths every day, that to me is a huge step in slowing down. Also, therapy is an opportunity to slow down. So my clients, I always say, like, this 45 minutes, I am going to be slowing you down because that is what you need. You need to be slowed down. And that's something I need to model for my clients because so many other people are just like rushing along and doing whatever. I want to be that slow space for them. And that's what I try to be.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So in a session when you're trying to slow down, like, is it just them being still for 45 minutes? That's the change, right? I'm assuming that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I think, first of all, being in a space with another person where you're co-regulating and we're not on our phones, we're not doing anything else but focusing on one thing is slowing down. I also will literally say to a client, like, pause, close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, let's take a deep breath. And I'll literally close my eyes and take a deep breath with them. Like, who's going to do that in your real life? Who is going to pause you and just like say, take a deep breath? I've never seen anyone do that at work. I've never been in a workplace and someone's like, let's all pause and take a deep breath. That would be great. But I think that models the idea that if you're on the subway and you're getting activated, like, wait, I'm just going to take a deep breath. So I think it's about practicing that. So sometimes it's physically slowing them down. And sometimes it is just this case of like, we're not part of the outside world right now. Like, we get to curate this container in a way that works for us and doesn't have to reflect the pressures of society or constant striving or wellness culture, which I like pushing against.
I like thinking of therapy in that way. I think people who are resistant to therapy may have never heard therapy described in a way where it's like a chance for you to slow down.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't that sound nice? Like, just a safe container where you can rest without screens and connect with another person who's there to support you. It's really appealing when you think of it in that way. So I'm hoping people who are maybe a little resistant to therapy start to see it in a potential chance to slow down, which is so true, right? It is always so nice to give yourself that space and time.
Yeah, definitely. And I really love the idea of therapy kind of being like the antidote to the constant striving. If in therapy, you're just like focused on goals and striving and doing all this, you're basically just mirroring what's going on in the outside world versus helping clients see, like, we're not going to be able to check off on a list what we accomplished today in therapy. We might not be able to see, the fruits of our labor for a really long time, or the changes you're making are subtle. It's not going to be this aha moment all the time. It is just going to be like, I feel slightly different, and that's a good thing. And I think that's part of us pushing against the need for productivity too. That just feeling of, I want to accomplish. It's not all about accomplishments, and that's not going to get you what you want. So I think that's really important.
I completely agree. I think that some people want every therapy session to be productive. And I think your voice in this interview is a great reminder that that's not necessarily the point of therapy, right? It's a slow growth process, and we can't put a timestamp on that.
Totally.
So, Lily, I think this has been a fabulous interview so far, and we've covered so many topics. I just wanted to ask you if you have any final words of wisdom for the audience today before I let you go.
I think I have to go with, I hope that everyone gets a moment today to slow down. So if you're listening, maybe just take 1 minute after this episode and just slow down. Maybe close your eyes. Maybe take 3 deep breaths. I really can't tell you how powerful it is to slow down. And I just wish that everyone can have a little moment of slowing down. And if you are curious about therapy, maybe also look into some therapists. That could be a good way to kind of create some slowness in your life too.
So speaking of therapy, I'd love it if you could share how the listeners could find you if they're interested in working with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on the Instagram, so you can find me on there at Thrope Therapy LCSW. And then I also have a website, thropetherapy.com. You can also directly email me. My email is lily@thropetherapy.com. I answer all my own emails, so feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm also really passionate about getting people connected with the right therapist. So if I or someone on my team is not a good fit for you, I'm pretty connected and can help you find other resources and other therapists. So reach out with any kind of questions or follow-ups from this. I'm excited to meet some of the listeners.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Lily. This was such a delight, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. Another episode of Full and Thriving in the books. I want to personally thank you for joining me in listening to today's show. And if you found value in this conversation, I would be so grateful if you could please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave a review. Your support not only helps us reach more people who are striving to live their most full and thriving life, but it also allows us to bring on even more incredible guests with valuable insights that can change your life. Every follow, every review makes a huge difference, and together we can continue to grow this beautiful community. Thanks again for being a part of the journey, and we'll see you next time on Full and Thriving.